Welcome to the Vertical MRO Podcast, where we dive into the world of helicopter maintenance, repair, and overhaul. In each episode, we talk with the technicians, engineers, and experts who keep helicopters flying. Because at the end of the day, no maintenance, no mission.
I've been on a few, but I'll give you one off of a helicopter salvage operation. I was on the top of a mountain called Swindle Mountain, and it was a Telus repeater site. The aircraft was parked on a beautiful pad, and it landed in there, and I guess halfway through the day, the pilot was in the communication shack where the technicians were working, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, up comes this horrific gust of wind. He was flying an A-Star, so the blades, of course, are pretty flexible. So he's looking out the shack window when this gust of wind came up, and the one blade is straight up in the air, like just straight up. He thought, oh my gosh, I better go look at that thing. So off he goes, and he couldn't see anything wrong, and he thought, gee, I better tie these blades down so this doesn't happen again. And then I'll phone Terrence. In any case, he got it done. So he's on the phone to me. He's in a Telus repeater shack, so he has a phone, so that was good. And so he's telling me about what happened, when all of a sudden another gust of wind came up while he's talking on the phone, and poor old guy starts swearing and shouting, and I said, what happened? And he said, the aircraft just got blown off the pad. Oh, and I said, what? And I guess because before, when it blew, the blades would flex up and allowed the wind and the gusts to go through. Now they're an airfoil, and they literally acted like an airfoil, and the gust lifted the tied down blades and aircraft right off the pad. And
welcome to part 2 of our conversation. If you missed part 1, you can find it in our previous episode. Welcome to the Vertical MRO Podcast, brought to you by Vertical HeliCASTS in partnership with Vertical Magazine. In this 2-part series of the Vertical MRO Podcast, I sit down with aviation veteran Terrence Eissfeldt, whose 4-decade career spans from Okanagan Helicopters to founding his own consulting business. Terrence shares stories from his early days in the industry, his family's deep aviation roots, and the pivotal moments that shaped his path from the hangar floor to leadership roles. The conversation explores how mentorship, trust, and community remain the cornerstones of aviation maintenance, even as technology, AI, and staffing challenges reshape the landscape. Terrence reflects on what's changed, what hasn't, and how maintainers can stay grounded while embracing the tools and innovation that will define the next generation of helicopter maintenance. With a focus on human connection, work-life balance, and passing on hard-won wisdom, this episode's a tribute to the people who keep rotorcraft flying safely and efficiently, and to the mentors who inspire them to do it well. Thanks to our sponsors, Vertical Aviation International, Essential Turbines, and Precision Aviation Group.
You talked about wanting to pursue adventure as a kid, and here you are talking about the occupational hazards being polar bears and being guided by an Eskimo with a rifle to the aircraft you're going to work on. That sounds just exactly like you had imagined it, as a young man. You brought up 2 things I want to touch on. One of which, and we'll come back to this. We'll go to the second one first. But the first one is recovery. I was a safety officer in my aviation unit, and we were tasked with coming up with a mishap plan that addressed the recovery of an aircraft, whether it was, a crash or responding to something who was a land immediately in the middle of the forest type thing. And we were working our way through, okay, what does this recovery look like, and what tools are essential? We, racked our brains and put our heads together and talked to other people and tried to come up with this plan. So I'll come back to that. The first thing I want to talk about is the bush pack. We talk about this in the podcast from time to time, and I think it's really interesting when you come up with like this pack of essential tools that you're going to take. Because I would imagine each tool's got to have multiple purposes in order to make it into the bag. So talk about your philosophy when it comes to the development of that bag and what that looks like.
It's gone through an evolution from when I first got into now, and but I would probably still do a similar kind of thing, and that is, we were taught in tech school, and I was taught by Gordon Peters. Again, he was the helicopter guy at the technical training school, and he was Mr. Helicopter, and he showed us exactly what we would need, and it wasn't much. And albeit he was working on piston engine Bell 47s and showing us, how to figure out if a cylinder was not firing properly and how to see if it was cool or hot, and with the end of a plastic end of a screwdriver kind of thing. And in any case, things have changed drastically from then to now. But even your basic hand tools, like your combination wrenches and that, you're going to have guys with, their very first set of Craftsman combination wrenches, depending on the type of aircraft you're dealing with, whether it's metric or whether it's standard. Of course, you'll know that before you go anywhere. But you're going to take, in a situation like that, you're going to take as little as possible, but you're also going to take things that you may not need that'll bite you if you don't have. And one of those things would be a multimeter. In those days, there was always an electrical issue somehow, and darn, I didn't bring my multimeter. And you're going to go, you've started the aircraft, the next thing you know, say you're on a Bell 206 and your beep or your trim switch isn't working properly, and it's just maybe it's a soldering, that soldering that came undone on the bottom of the plate of the switch. And that's happened before. Well, I need a soldering gun, or I need a soldering iron. Well, not just everybody. Where do you plug it in the middle of nowhere, right? So, and I learned really quick that you can get adapters for soldering irons that plug straight into the aircraft battery, and you're up and running, and you're good to go. And it takes 5 minutes, and you fixed it. And so, is there a standard? There's a standard set of lightweight tools. I can't speak to a specific aircraft type because a Sikorsky 61 is going to be different than a 206 and an A-Star or whatever like that. But you're going to have your basic combination wrenches, quarter drive set at the very least, depending on what you're working on. If you're going out on a recovery of some sort, in terms of, you're fixing a snag, not necessarily doing a salvage operation. If you're doing a salvage operation, you're going to be bringing some big wrenches and stuff like that. And in the odd case, I've had to bring a chainsaw, believe it or not.
Wow.
So sling gear, long lines, nets, lanyards, that kind of thing. That's typical for the sling job. But when it comes to the tools, it'll be aircraft specific. So there's no canned amount of information that I could give you that would be, okay, this is what you'll need or this is what you won't need.
Right.
It just depends on the type of aircraft, I think.
And I think you probably already answered my follow-up question is, what's the one thing you would never leave without? And is it the multimeter that you just referenced?
Or is it the chainsaw? Actually, it might be a fishing rod for that matter. The multimeter is a be-all and end-all, but the one thing that, again, depending on the aircraft type, but one thing I wouldn't be caught without is a 1/4-inch ratchet and a socket set, and now some ratcheting box end wrenches as well. And then when it comes to screwdrivers and that kind of thing, everybody's got cordless screwdrivers and that, and they've come a long way with that. When I was just getting out, everybody was buying a snap-on screwdriver. It was about that long, and it had multi-bits that were in the bottom, and I think the thing cost $60. I mean, I couldn't believe it when I was that age, but now I don't even know if anybody has a real screwdriver like that anymore. So it's all cordless with different bits, and of course you got to be careful that you don't overdo it with these things because you can strip a head off pretty quick. And still a 1/4-inch drive set and a combination wrench set and a multimeter for sure.
I love that conversation. For selfish reasons, we go off-roading and we've got a side-by-side, and I try and think through what do I need here. So I'm always trying to take bits of what you guys talk about and apply that to what I decide to bring with me when I go off-roading. Because we don't want to take too much. I'd rather save that room for something else. But love the insight there. Back to the recovery efforts, I think a lot of the situations that we thought through were more what you referenced in the salvage operations, involving defueling aircraft and all the things that go with the recovery of an aircraft it's down for whatever the reason is. Talk about your experiences doing that. Maybe an interesting salvage operation that you're part of and some of the lessons learned there.
Wow, I've been on a few, but I'll give you one off of a helicopter salvage operation. Was on the top of a mountain called Swindle Mountain. Telus repeater site that we ended up with a salvage requirement because the aircraft was parked on a beautiful pad, and it landed in there. And I guess halfway through the day, the pilot was in the communication shack where the technicians were working, and he was just waiting. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, up comes this horrific gust of wind, and he was flying an A-Star, so the blades, of course, are pretty flexible. And so he's looking out the shack window when this gust of wind came up, and the blades, the one blade is straight up in the air, like just straight up. And so he thought, oh my gosh, that's I better go look at that thing. So off he goes to look at it after the wind died down, and he couldn't see anything wrong. And he thought, gee, I better tie these blades down so this doesn't happen again. And then I'll phone Terry. So anyway, he tied the blades down, got somebody to help him. Although it was a nice pad, the blade ends, the tips of the blades were over the edge of the pad. And the pad, of course, is, 15 feet off the ground. And so it was a bit of an effort to get it done. But in any case, he got it done. So he's on the phone to me. He's in a Telus repeater shack, so he has a phone. So that was good. And so he's telling me about what happened. And I said, okay. And I'm walking him through what he needs to check, when all of a sudden another gust of wind came up while he's talking on the phone, and the poor old guy starts swearing and shouting. And I said, what happened? And he said, the aircraft just got blown off the pad.
Oh,
and I said,
geez.
What? And I guess because before, when it blew, the blades would flex up and allowed the wind and the gusts to go through. Now they're an airfoil, and they literally acted like an airfoil, and the gusts lifted the tied down blades and aircraft right off the pad. And anyway, so there it was, literally crashed. And I said, okay, well, give me some time and we'll figure this out. So I think we ended up dispatching another aircraft. I went along, of course. And we had basically, we went over to the aircraft. We had all the gear to do the salvage. In fact, I think we might have waited one day, if I remember correctly. So we all left the next day because it was around this time of the year. And of course, light is a big deal and lack thereof. So we thought, well, let's give ourselves the benefit, and we'll arrange for a medium helicopter to come in and do the sling. And should give us enough time to get everything sorted out. So we went in with all the gear, and the next morning, and of course there's room on the pad because that aircraft is off the pad now. And so we parked that one, and there's, I think, three of us, and we were rigging this aircraft up and defueling it, like you say, and taking blades off, and so it was about probably 3 in the afternoon, maybe 2, I can't remember. And so we hear this medium aircraft coming in, and we know he's not going to be able to land close. So he's just going to have to literally he came in with his line already attached. So we had everything rigged up, and we hooked this line up, and he lifts this thing up and then scoots down the mountainside, and off he goes. So the rest of us scramble, get all our gear together. Of course, we got lots of gear. And we're trying to get in the aircraft, and this weather system blew in. And literally, the pilot we had there, he was running the aircraft, and we were all piling in with all our gear. And we sat there with the doors closed, and he's trying to get his windshield clear, and it literally iced up completely.
Oh, geez.
We shut it down and tied it down, put the covers on, and they were... Fortunately, they had accommodations right there on the top of the mountain, because that's what can happen. And they had crews staying up there off and on all the time. So we were what was called swindled. And we all got T-shirts. And we said, I have been swindled. And a picture of this mountain and that kind of stuff. But we didn't get out of there till the next morning, and had to de-ice the aircraft and on and on and on. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was quite the interesting event for sure.
The environment that you're familiar with and work in most of the time is so foreign to me, being in Southern California. I flew a little city called Ontario, California, which is about 40 miles east of LA. And, you know, I talk about our survival kits, and typically our survival kit on a normal flight was a credit card and maybe a bottle of water. You know, you land an FBO and you can't go somewhere. Well, you just take the credit card, hop in an Uber, and you go to a fast food joint and get something to eat, or get a hotel. So when you talk about these different environments and scenarios, it's really intriguing to me to hear about how you operate in those environments. You know, I think about -30 trying to thread a fuel line on. Talk about the loss of dexterity and some of the tricks of doing something like that.
This episode is brought to you by Essential Turbines, powering missions, not just engines. As a Rolls-Royce authorized AMROC, we've supported M250 and Rolls-Royce 300 engines for over 30 years, delivering world-class overhauls, increased power, and rapid turnarounds for operators around the world. From single aircraft to national fleets, customers choose Essential because we know your name. We answer your call, and we solve the issue. We're big enough to deliver, small enough to care. Because your next mission can't wait. Learn more at essentialturbines.com.
Well, yeah, that kind of goes with the territory, and you do have to be hyper aware of a situation like that, because you can end up in a world of hurt in a hurry, especially with cold related issues. And so to do something like that, like, you know, anything below 20 below, and you're actually having to work 20 below C, Celsius, basically we would always wear like a mitt, like a leather mitt with some inserts inside of it. So you're keeping your hands warm as a rule. And if that wasn't good enough, then you would slip in a hand warmer in addition to the mitt. And so it keeps your hands warm. But when you need the dexterity, so you pull your hand out of the mitt, and now you've got normally a cotton glove on, and then you're able to use have the dexterity that you need in order to operate in that kind of temperatures. Or believe it or not, you know, a lot of us could still get by with just using, you know, bare hands. But not for long.
Yeah.
And don't push it, because as soon as that starts getting cold, you're going to risk frostbite like immediately. And so, you know, it's something you just have to have a situational awareness about. Even something as simple as I can remember operating up in Northwest Territories one winter in a pipeline camp. We had a long ranger that I was supporting the pipe or the camp with. Anyway, I forget what I was doing, but the aircraft was running, and I was, you know, my hands were up and my mitts were on, and I was doing something, but this amount of my wrists were actually exposed, and I didn't catch it until later that night, and I could barely move my hands because they must have got some minor frostbite.
Oh.
And so I literally wrapped hot water, boiling water over the these washcloths, and I wrapped them around my wrist, and then put tensor bandages so my wrists were actually spring-loaded in the right direction. So I could carry on working the next day, kind of thing. But in any case, yeah, you learn. And footwear, you always had to have the right gear, and you know, layers were a big thing when it came to insulated coveralls and long johns and different kinds. You never just put one thing on; you layered it up all the time. Yeah. So, yeah, I mainly had good success with listening to the older guys prior to doing that. So,
yeah, that part of that mentorship that we talk about all the time.
Yeah.
Last question, I guess, on experiences. You know,
Sure.
You talk about adventure, and a lot of the folks that come into the industry are like, well, where's this place going to take me? You know, and it literally takes you around the world. When you think back to the places you've been, what's the one place you're like, I cannot believe I wound up in this location doing this thing?
Well, that's a good question, because I was in a few of those places. One of them was early on in my career. Again, that at that time was Okanagan Helicopters. They had just built a brand new hangar in Fort St. John, that's in British Columbia. And so anyway, I think I maybe just got my license. I'm not too sure. I can't remember that. But in any case, they would go out from the base in the summer, especially, and go to various fire camps all over the North Country. And so I was dispatched and tasked to go with Bell 206 with a pilot by the name of Don McTighe. And it was actually my very first tour, and as an apprentice engineer. And so anyway, we were, I'll skip through some of the issues, but we ended up in an area called, I think it was northwest of Fort St. John. And it was on an airstrip, a known airstrip, dirt for that matter, called Paddy Airstrip. And so we staged out of there and then set a fire camp up that we operated out of for about 2 weeks. And then we flew back. We decided the decision was made to fly back, demob the camp and fly back to Paddy Airstrip. And then have the guys picked up from there. I think it might have been the end of the season. And so anyway, so we looked at our fuel cache we had, and Don said, well, I'm going to be pushing it here. I can get all the gear out, but once we get to Paddy Airstrip, I'm out of fuel. Okay, well, we'll get some more coming in for you, the fire boss said, and blah, blah, blah. So that was fine. So anyway, we got to Paddy Airstrip. Sure enough, we don't have enough fuel to do anything after that. So then a Twin Otter comes in and takes a couple trips and takes all the fire guys out of there. There was Don and I completely alone on this airstrip for the next day and a half. And we had food, and but I mean, it was and exactly what you just said. It was like, how the heck did I get myself into this? I don't even know if I'm going to get out of here, and there's bears all over the place. And so anyway, long story short, is about a day and a half later, and I hear this way in the distance, this Bell 205 going thump, 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 coming in our direction. And I'm going, oh, thank goodness. And here he had a sling load of barrels of fuel with him, and a pilot by the name of Dave Small. And so anyway, he landed, and then he took off right away, just left us fuel, and off he went. So Don and I fueled up and headed back to Fort St. John. So
wow.
Yeah, it's just little things. They're moments in time. And, was that what I signed up for? Well, yeah, I guess I was young. I was, adventurous and all the rest. But at the time, it would be like, holy crap, I didn't really think this, I didn't think this through. But it was fun. I enjoyed it. And I got lots of those kinds of stories for sure.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think most young folks have that adventure side of them, but they want to, kind of scratch that itch when it relates to that. What's cool about our industry is, when you move on to the next stage of your life, maybe you have kids, whatever the thing that changes, there's other roles that you can move into to kind of help with the family life, as it were. Talk about your career and how the different phases of your career kind of satisfied each stage of your life in that way, or not.
Well, the helicopter industry is, as a rule, not an easy thing to balance out with a family life oriented goal. But a lot of us do it and have done it, and some successfully and some not so successfully. And I think the first acronym that anybody ever learned in aviation was AIDS, and that was the Aviation Induced Divorce Syndrome. And I just thank the Lord that didn't end up in my repertoire. But it takes a lot of work and a lot of willingness to listen. I'm talking as a husband here and a father, and to be willing to go that extra mile when you are home and when you do have time to don't spend it in front of the hockey game. Don't spend it in front of the Blue Jays, which is tonight, by the way. Yep. And are they going to beat the Dodgers? We'll see. But in any case, and then, back in the day, families were important. They all said so. But the families were not high on the list of considerations when you're giving a guy, a dispatch task. But as the years wore on, and after I had my own company and I was responsible for that kind of thing, my wife would often give me heck because she said, you treat your guys way too well. Nobody treated you like that. And I said, yeah, well, I want to keep these guys. Yeah. And so that was really important. So balancing your family life in this industry is never an easy task. So it takes a lot of patience and willingness to bend, I guess, in the end, and accommodate.
Going back to the conference that we were at, we had Clint Pulver come in, and he talked about a book that he wrote titled "I Love It Here," and essentially he's talking about what you just referred to, the balance of life, or the enrichment of life for the folks that work with you and for you. And it seems that, as a result of a lot of the conversations I had at the MRO conference, a lot of companies are realizing, hey, I've got to come up with a way to provide a better work-life balance for the folks that work with me and for me, for all the reasons you just discussed. It's a situation we find ourselves in where recruitment's going to be an ongoing issue. And if you don't treat your folks well, there's someone next door who will, or a mile down. I forget the stat that Clinton talked about, but it's in the realm of 60% of folks are actively looking for a new job. So I think the approach you took is fantastic. Sure, not everyone treats their folks well, but I do. And I'm going to retain these folks because they're going to know that I value them as people and as employees. So kudos to you for recognizing that and taking care of your people. Curious for you, if you had a chance to sit through Clint's message, what was your takeaways and what were your thoughts?
I sure did, and Clint was great. He nailed it when he came to the topics of the different ideas of how to treat people and what motivates people and what doesn't. And basically, if I had to sum it up in a few words, it would basically be, know who your people are. That was one of my key takeaways. And he started off by telling the story of him as a young kid and being given a pair of drumsticks. Well, you have no idea. It spoke miles to me. I'm a drummer. And so I paid attention, and it was like him as a young kid would have been washed out in a lot of classrooms today. He would have been, maybe he would have needed Ritalin, maybe he would have needed something, but you know what, in the end, that's not the answer for every kid. And I think it takes, a teacher like he had, that was an exceptional teacher, to take the time necessary to understand the kid. Now, flash forward to people. Take the time necessary to understand your people. And not everybody's going to have the same skill set. No engineer has the same skill set as the other engineer. When it comes down to it, if you want, say, for instance, a sheet metal repair done on something, yeah, I can do it. I'm trained in it. But darn it, I'm going to give you I'm going to recommend somebody that's really skilled at it, and it's going to make it look like a piece of art. But if you want some troubleshooting done on something, you're probably, I'm probably your guy. I can figure out a system. I understand them. I'm not, the world's guru on it, but the bottom line is that's where, a lot of times I was dispatched into situations where, we got to figure out what's wrong with this thing. Not everybody can do that. So, but that doesn't mean you're better than somebody else. It means that your skill sets are different. So know your people. Clint was amazing. He was definitely a good presenter, and I appreciated how he presented things. I have his book right behind me. There's two of them right there, and
such a good book.
The workbook and the book. So the jury's out on as to exactly the details of each chapter and that kind of thing, because I haven't dove into them. But the bottom line is, I think he's started off fantastic, and I really appreciated what he was saying. And one of the things that I noticed, even after we were debriefing with a group of us at a company, one of the people, the director of maintenance, in fact, said, I think the best thing out of the whole conference was Clint Pulver's presentation. Yeah. Now, coming from a DOM who's mechanically inclined and a very skilled troubleshooter, and that was his huge takeaway. Well, it's one of his takeaways, but that spoke volumes to me. I thought, wow, good on you. And
so powerful, his message is, and I think that's what we've looked to create with Vertical MRO is something that can speak to everybody and motivate people in ways beyond, the mechanical side of things, whether it's through leadership. Leadership is a big issue that we face on an ongoing basis, mental health, mental acuity, through Jamie Wood. But back to Clint's book just briefly, when I read through it, one thing that was really cool is it wasn't just a book of philosophy. And a lot of the books that I've read, kind of surrounding the leadership realm is a book of theoretical things that you can in theory do and might help. But Clint's book, at the end of each chapter, there's actionable items to actually make you a better leader and to put the things into practice that he talked about, which I thought was a great thing. I haven't gone through the workbook, but highly recommend Clint, his book. If you can see him somewhere, whether it's the Vertical MRO conference or anywhere else. He was on episode 57 and 58 of the Vertical MRO podcast. We got a chance to go to Metro Aviation and sit down with Sean Bruton, who's the director of maintenance there, and had a wonderful conversation with both Sean and Clint. And so Clint, that's a good place to start to get some of his insights and ideas on what we're talking about. But thank you for sharing your insights with me. I do think that was a valuable part of the conference. Speaking of conferences, let's go back to your career. You spent, was it 2010 to 2019 as a maintenance committee chair for Helicopter Association of Canada. Talk about that time you spent there, some of the insights you gained in that role, and what your thoughts are having done that.
Yeah, that was a good time. It was challenging in terms of basically understanding what the need of the maintenance community was. I mean, I had my own ideas, but I had to go into chairing those committees with a completely open agenda, if you want, at the beginnings, because there, in my understanding, there could have been a huge gamut of different issues that, gee, do you DOMs want us to all focus on a problem on a particular aircraft, or do you, a mechanical issue or a supply issue, or, in some cases, the medium fleet were being grounded, the Bell medium fleet, because of an NDT requirement on the main rotor heads. And so because of that, the initiative of the maintenance committee, aka HAC, going not head to head, but collaboratively and advocating on behalf of the maintenance community, they were able to get authorizations for NDT to be performed in the field on certain things with certain training. And that was great. The MD 500s or the MD 369s, main rotor blade inspection. I think it was every 30 hours, if I remember correctly. And the pilots could not do it because there was a special tool called a magnifying glass that was required to be used. Well, you're talking about huge amounts of labor and expense to the operators in order to just operate these aircraft. Well, because of the initiative, again, with qualified individuals with a huge amount of experience on these aircraft, we came up with a training curriculum for the pilots. And as long as we could show that they had training, Transport Canada then approved that inspection to be done and signed out by a pilot. And that was an airworthiness directive. So that was a one-off, and you don't see that very often, for sure. So that kind of thing, I realized once I stepped in that, we want to have whatever topics we're talking about being very meaningful and valid. So that helped shape my career, not only in terms of the HAC maintenance committee meeting the need there, but also bringing it home and bringing it to the company that I was at and saying, okay, well, let's talk about, what meaningful issues there were. So I was able to parallel that kind of thing. So I learned a lot about, meaningful discussions and also, how to collaborate. If you're the smartest one in the room in a meeting, you're probably in the wrong room. So that's always something that I brought to the table. And I want people who are skilled and passionate and know what the heck they're talking about. And I'm ready and willing to listen and learn. So that's some of the ways it helped shape my career.
Yeah, I love that philosophy. I think that's a powerful philosophy when it comes to leadership. Identifying the subject matter experts and surrounding yourselves with people like that challenge you to be better, and whatever the discipline is. I highly value that and love that philosophy. In your time in that role, you discovered the power of the collective voice, as you kind of illustrated, and how you're able to get the training curriculum together for the pilots. You talked kind of, I would assume you saw the power of gathering in the place for people to network. Talk about that as it relates to where we are today and kind of what you saw and experienced at the MRO conference.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
Yeah, well, that was, we were able to see the results of that even, say, at one of the OEM presentations where, a lot of times in the past at different conventions, you would listen to an OEM presentation and it would be kind of canned and it would be kind of, okay, well, that's nice, but, what does it really mean? The presentations at this MRO were meaningful. They had good substance, and most of all, and I talked to the presenter, actually it was Joe Braz, and I said, Joe, you did a great job doing that presentation, because I've heard a lot of presenters, and unfortunately, a lot of them are tasked with doing it. And so they're not comfortable.
Yeah.
And you can see that, or they're not maybe fluent in the language or whatever it is. And that becomes a distraction and not comfortable to listen to. So I made a point of telling Joe he did a great job. And in the end, during that particular presentation, there was a topic come up that affected operators right across the board. I won't go into it right now on this presentation, but Joe actually handed it off to his higher up because he happened to be in the room, and he said, "Oh well, so and so wouldn't mind talking about that himself." So we invited him up, and anyway, the operators then, or the AMOs, were able to talk to the man directly, and okay, well, this isn't going to change, but you know what, this isn't working for us, and so we were able to see the fact that the OEM in this case was present and actually had credible response in terms of where they stand on a corporate policy. And now that may not be what the operator or the AMO wanted to hear, but at least that was an answer. I'm guessing they probably took that back to home base, and they were talking about it in detail, saying, well, these guys are not happy with this. And is it going to change? Well, we have no idea. But if this gave the opportunity to discuss, to dialogue, to say, hey, we need this changed, please, and again, corporate policy is corporate policy, and it's there for different reasons than what AMOs and operators exist for. But it just opens up a door that wasn't even open before.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that was one of the overarching goals, was to create a place for people to come and have those conversations. Whatever that conversation is, just getting everyone under one roof to talk about things that matter to the industry, and that was, I think, powerful. I'd stand in there and, I'd kind of close my eyes and listen to the overall chatter taking place. And it was really cool. It was almost like a pinch me moment, because we talked about the value of Verticon and a lot of the larger organizations as it relates to the flight crew side of things. There's not many conferences that have something that's established directly for the maintenance folks. In fact, this is the only event that I know of where it's just for maintenance, and again, to come under one roof and talk about the things that are important was really cool. So yeah, thanks for your insight there, and thanks for being a part of that. It was really cool. Going back to your time as the maintenance chair, identifying some of the challenges that our industry faced during that time, and then moving to today, are some of those challenges similar? What have you seen? What do you think are the major challenges that we face as an industry?
Well, the hot topic, or the hot button topic right away, is staffing shortages. There's no two ways about that, and it's not just staffing shortages, but experienced staffing shortages. I've seen where companies have been hiring apprentices, and that's fantastic. That's what's needed, but it's a double-edged sword, because you start hiring apprentices. Well, that takes a guy with experience to focus and supervise that person until they get to such a point. And it takes a while, depending on the particular individual, as to when you can cut them loose versus always constantly being on them. You have to be there. But that's what it takes, and that's what's going to take. That's a huge challenge. So as far as it goes, it's I don't know that it's just relegated. It's not. I know that to the engineering side, the maintenance side, it's obviously pilots as well, and we've seen that, and so that's an ongoing issue. Another issue is AI. And AI is a powerful, fantastic force in itself when it comes to data collection and that kind of thing. It depends on the information, I think, that I'm looking for, or anybody happens to be looking for. A person would have to think, is it credible information? Is it reasonable? I think the best way to field that ball would be to understand where the information is coming from. Like, who's the batter behind the ball, right? And check it out before acting or implementing any kind of critical actions with that kind of information. So that's a big thing as well. And so there's a huge, not a huge, but it's a disparity between, okay, we have AI, can I believe it? And that's the deal. So those are some of the challenges that I see facing the maintenance industry. Ongoing is the parts issue. You could call this geopolitical or not. It depends on your opinion, I suppose. But in the end, a challenge is parts. Yeah. And who would have thought that you would have, and this happened since COVID, and COVID is done and it's gone. But the bottom line is we're still suffering because of that event globally. And the way we're suffering is, who would have thought we would have had to get our ducks in a row and start ordering TBO components well over a year in advance. And that's normal now. And it used to be 2 months was, oh gosh, that's long enough. You better be well ahead of that curve. Yeah. So, that's where it's at. So yeah, we're into that as a major challenge for sure.
Yeah. It's shocking to me that, operators and everybody is buying aircraft, perfectly good airworthy aircraft, to essentially cannibalize for that reason. I think if you would have asked somebody 10 years ago, even maybe 5 years ago, prior to COVID, do you envision this being a thing? I would have been like, no, that's wild. No way. Maybe on a rare cases, but the fact that that's a common practice today, illustrates what you're describing. The geopolitical side of things is really interesting to me as we talk about parts supply and how that is impacted. The war between Russia and Ukraine is a good example of some of the components that are, or the materials, I guess, that are needed for some of these components, how that war has impacted the availability of some of this stuff. And I don't think oftentimes we consider how geopolitics really plays into the overall availability of the things that we need for the production of whatever the tool is. And if you look at, across the world right now, we're a hotbed of conflict everywhere. So it's just one more reason why we sit in this position where parts availability is so difficult, from the OEM standpoint to everyone else. It's a wild place.
Definitely. And we see the results of that. We have, operators in an operator in Western Canada with aircraft parked because can't get parts out of Russia. Yeah. And so, and they're perfectly good aircraft. It's just can't operate them till we can get parts again for them.
Yeah. So wild.
Yeah.
Well, I want to shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
You had written an article and had a piece on internal audits. Let's go to that article. I think you did a really good job writing that. And I will say, you're going to be contributing to the Vertical MRO newsletter and some of that. Talk about that briefly. What some of your goals are and what you're going to create there.
Yeah, the motivation there was based on areas of what I would call common need that I've seen within the helicopter maintenance industry. Again, on a maintenance side as well as on the QA side, and they're both maintenance related for sure. But there's common misconceptions with what is and what isn't, and what's okay and what's not okay, and what's the real intent behind this, and what does CARS say, and all that good stuff. So there's a lot of topics that just aren't being addressed, and because we haven't had an industry collaboration when it comes to maintenance topics and issues like we used to, they're getting washed downriver. And I mean, they are what they are, and of course, us maintainers, we'll make it work one way or another. But I see areas that can be of need in terms of different topics and issues that can be touched on, and open up dialogue so that and even give some help so that people can understand, oh, I'm not the only one with that problem, or I had no idea I could do that, or whatever it is. And so that's my motivation for doing this. And so that's why I'm kind of interested in getting involved on providing a column.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. It'll be a huge addition to Vertical and the voice of the maintenance side of things. And I guess the article that I'm referring to is the first piece that I read that you authored. The concept is on annual audits. Talk about that a little bit and what your thoughts were as you wrote this article.
Well, annual audits on an AMO and or OC, because basically the maintenance control manual is, as it relates to what we call an operating certificate or the operations side of an organization. The MPM, the maintenance policy manual, is relevant to the AMO and the maintenance organization. So in a lot of cases, an organization will have both. They're a dual certificate organization, as it's called. So they'll have an MCM and an MPM, and both of them have similar kind of internal audit requirements. And that's not even touching base on the approved training schools. They have their own internal audit requirements as well. And so they would have an MCM. So in any case, a lot of times as an operator, we were tasked with, originally flashing back to too many years ago, we would get an information, or we get a heads up from Transport Canada that they're going to come and do an audit. Well, they've changed immensely over the years. They don't do audits anymore. They went to what's called program validation inspections. So making sure that you were in compliance with what you said you were going to do. Then they changed it to, now they do what's called a process inspection. So they're just verifying that you're doing all of your auditing and making sure you're in compliance. So they're basically reviewing your compliance measures. So with that, you still have operators and AMOs that are more interested in, oh my gosh, I got to do this internal audit again. Oh, here we go again. Okay, check. Oh, I need a finding. And because if I don't have a finding, then they're going to find one for me. And I better put a finding down. So they do a ad hoc kind of knee jerk. Okay, some stupid thing. I'll find something here. I know there's a plastic lid off of a can of oil and it was left on the bench. Okay, well, there's a classic. That's not a real finding. I mean, it is, but it's not. So anyway, the bottom line is it's an inconvenience at any time of year, and nobody's really interested in doing something so that they're actually doing something meaningful that's actually raising the bar in your own organization. And so what I researched, reviewed, and I created in a couple organizations now is doing what's called a segmented and or a monthly audit. And it's all quite, you're able to do it with Transport Canada, but you want to work with Transport Canada to make sure that they may have some advice or not or whatever. Regardless, the annual audit is something that can be segmented, so you don't have this entire ginormous situation happening at whatever time of year that you've got it. Now you've got some time to put into looking at an area that is a little more complex. For instance, your parts management area. How do I, is my POs actually working? Is my service orders actually working? Are my work orders actually reflective of what I said I'm doing? And are we using those in our certification process? And I mean, there's a lot of complexity to the whole thing. And so in that regard, if you can segment it down to bite-sized chunks, now it's not this huge thing. Now, yes, you're going to be doing it through the year, but even in most cases, you'll stop your segmented approach when your busy season starts. A lot of operators are going, say, from October through to May and or April. And so you're doing your auditing during those months. And so you've broken all the areas down so that you can, it's not going to be a huge initiative or labor intensity where everybody's just focused on this, to a more manageable side. And you're going to look at it and make it something comprehensive and efficient. And that's what I found. And that's why I wrote the article. So.
Thank you to our sponsor, Vertical Aviation International. This March, you need to be at Verticon, the largest vertical aviation trade show and conference in the world. With over 15,000 attendees and all the major OEMs and suppliers, it's the place to be. Register today and save. Early bird prices end January 16th. Go to verticon.org.
I love the concept of audits, outside of the regulations that say you have to have one. I think the last thing anybody wants is for the FAA or the Canadian version of the FAA to come in after an incident and mishaps taken place and go through everything and shut you down because of all the things that they found that may have led to this or created this chain of events that led to the mishap, the crash. I think an audit, when done properly, comes in and identifies those things and removes those links from that chain of events that leads to something like that. Makes your operation more effective and efficient. So I really find a lot of value in having somebody come in from the outside and identify, hey, here's what you can do to make your operation better. What's tough is it hurts the ego, right? Nobody wants to feel deflated. But I think that deflated feeling in that moment is much better than the mental health issues that arise after the mishap and loss of life that can ultimately happen when some of these safety issues are overlooked, So love that you spent time writing on that. I do think it's important. So thank you for spending time doing that.
You're welcome.
Moving forward, we talked about technology a little bit. What are some of the technological advancements you see that are most exciting from a maintenance perspective?
Well, as cautious as I mentioned about AI, I'm excited about AI. It's a powerful tool. And given the right data and implementation, it has the capabilities of, changing absolutely a huge amount of administrative sides for research and review and that kind of thing. So I think that's one of the new kind of new technologies that are arising. That's going to be really key in getting more efficient and that kind of thing. So that's number one. Some of the other areas that these new aircraft, every one of them that comes out have the latest and greatest technologies, whether it's radios, communications, avionics of all sorts. This how the structure is even put together with basically cutting edge technologies and that kind of thing. All of these things are very, very positive changes. So that's some of the stuff that I'm looking at here, and I think it's going to be really good.
Yeah, I love the conversation of technology and some of the ways that'll make us more efficient to help with a lot of things. But one, how to help deal with the recruitment issue. If you have an ongoing shortage of folks, we got to figure out how to make the folks that we do have more efficient and how to improve their productivity in a way that doesn't overburden those folks and ask too much of people that they're just going to walk away and be like, I've had enough of this. So again, that conversation surrounding technology is really important. In the spirit of time, taking quite a bit of your time today, I kind of go towards the end of our conversation here. And, when you think about your career as a bush mechanic, as a entry level maintenance engineer, all the way to a CEO, you take all that collective experience you got and then apply that to the young man, the young woman who's walking into this industry, maybe first day on the job as a new apprentice or new AME. What advice would you give to that young person that's walking through the door? How do you walk out the other side of the career, like where you are, where you're happy and healthy, still passionate about the industry that we're a part of?
Well, the one thing I try not to do is lose the fact that, we certainly have operational requirements, mechanical requirements, and that kind of thing. We try not to disregard the fact that these are all human beings with human needs and requirements and expectations. And so I tell them in the same regard, be willing to listen, be willing to ask and learn. And don't be scared to tap into the industry's experienced people or feel intimidated to do that. It's not always every AME that is easily approachable and willing to actually give others the benefit of their experience. And so they'll figure that out soon enough, just based on character types and that kind of thing. But it's basically a welcoming. You try to welcome them in an atmosphere that is inclusive and respectful, and understanding that they're here, they're brand new. Yeah, they're probably all passionate, like what we heard with some of the apprentices, even at the VMRO. But they're probably a little intimidated, and that's a natural thing. Like I said, when I was in their shoes, and I'd be sitting in a coffee room or the lunchroom, I normally didn't say anything. I just listened a lot. So, until suddenly I couldn't help myself and I had to unload a story on them. But that's my encouragement for them. Listen and learn, and don't be scared to ask questions.
Love it. You've had a long and successful career. But thank you for joining us on the podcast and for sharing your knowledge here. I think a lot of tribal knowledge is shared on the podcast, and that's one of our overarching goals. I know our conversation will resonate with a lot of folks who've listened to you share a lot of that tribal knowledge. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you think, I'd like to throw this out before we walk out of here?
If I had to summarize and that kind of thing, I'd say, coming from my perspective, this is what I try to do. And every day is a new day. And every day is an opportunity to learn. I don't care how many years you've been in this industry or any industry for that matter. Who we work with determines, and from what I've experienced, how we do our job and whether or not I'm going to do a good job or a bad job. And so good relationships then basically are built on trust. The respect, honesty, and trust that's built up is critical and key to a good working environment. And if you're not enjoying your work and going into work, then something needs to change. And so, that's a hard thing to say, because it's easy for somebody to say when they're at my end of it. But when you're just trying to, get started in that, well, how do I change? Don't be scared of change. I have to sum it up by saying people are really the most important factor in any good organization or safety program. Yeah. And everything else, it's all fluff. But if you listen to Clint Pulver, you'll find out exactly how important they are. So, and I agree with that 150%.
Yeah, as valuable as technology is, there's nothing that replaces the human element of what we do. Whether it's from the relational standpoint or the mentorship standpoint, it's just such an important part of our industry and community. It's easy to forget. Like you talked about, we all remember being brand new day one in that job, looking at the old salty, crusty people. You're like, I don't ever want to be like that. And then you get to this point, you're like, I don't want to be like that. It's easy to forget how you felt that first day, but I think it's important to reflect and be like, hey, I recognize this person's uncomfortable. they could use a mentor that could help them through this career. So all that to say, kudos to you for all you've done. Excited to hear your voice continue to tell and share some of the tribal knowledge you have through the Vertical MRO podcast, through Vertical as in the written piece. Anyways, thank you very much, Terrence. It's been an honor to sit here and talk to you. Thank you for taking your time. And I'll open it one last time. Any last things you'd like to throw out there?
John, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate being able to share this. I'm not anybody's guru when it comes to having experienced everything, but I'm certainly happy and willing to share whatever experiences I've had if it's going to help somebody else. And most of all, keeping people coming home at the end of the day. That's always been my motivation. So I've always tried to create an environment that enables that. So, and in my experience, you can be miserable and you can tell people what you want to do, or you can say, hey, why don't you come along and help me do this? So it's a different approach that maybe some people don't like, but I think that when you have a good working environment, there's the beginnings of a safe working environment.
Yeah.
So
love it.
There you go.
All righty, sir. Well, until next time, we'll catch you later. Cheers.
All right. Thank you. Bye for now.
Stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Essential Turbines, powering missions, not just engines. As a Rolls-Royce authorized AMROC, we've supported M250 and Rolls-Royce 300 engines for over 30 years, delivering world-class overhauls, increased power, and rapid turnarounds for operators around the world. From single aircraft to national fleets, customers choose Essential because we know your name. We answer your call, and we solve the issue. We're big enough to deliver, small enough to care. Because your next mission can't wait. Learn more at essentialturbines.com.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
Thank you to our sponsor, Vertical Aviation International. This March, you need to be at Verticon, the largest vertical aviation trade show and conference in the world. With over 15,000 attendees and all the major OEMs and suppliers, it's the place to be. Register today and save. Early bird prices end January 16th. Go to verticon.org. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Vertical MRO Podcast, brought to you by Vertical HeliCASTS in partnership with Vertical Magazine. A special thanks to Terrence Eissfeldt for sharing his inspiring stories and insights on mentorship, trust, and the evolving landscape of helicopter maintenance. I know you'll hear much more from Terry going forward. As we start the new year, let's continue to prioritize safety, innovation, and the passing of wisdom within our rotorcraft community. Wishing everyone a new year filled with safe flights, successful missions, and continued progress in helicopter aviation.